Into the chaos we go, into the courtroom battle involving the Premier League and Manchester City. Here to dissect it all with me is lawyer, football finance expert and former financial advisor to Manchester City, Stefan Borson. And making his debut, I'm delighted to welcome Forest Green Rovers chairman Dale Vince. Gentlemen, how are we? We well?
Very good.
Yeah, not bad, thanks.
Great to have you along. Let's get straight into this courtroom showdown then. Manchester City versus the Premier League. Both have raised their arms to claim a legal victory in this case, which involves associated party transactions. We've had Man City accuse the Premier League of being misleading over the verdict of the case. They've even written a letter to all 19 fellow clubs in the top flight and to the league themselves. So, Stefan, I'll start with you. In the simplest terms you can, what is this case all about?
So, on the back of the Newcastle takeover, a number of the clubs wanted to put in place more stringent rules around the deals that were done with parties close to the ownership of clubs. And that was particularly in focus because clearly there was a feeling that Newcastle would quickly do a number of commercial deals with Saudi partners. And we learnt from the decision and the judgment that came out over the last couple of days, some of the background and the timings around that. So the rules came in, expanded the existing PSR rules related to what's known in accounting terms as related parties. And those are parties who have shared ownership and pass a certain accounting test within clubs' reports and accounts. So it's expanded that to a wider group of companies who are close to the ownership of clubs, and also introduced a number of rules that allowed the league to assess for fair market value those commercial transactions that were proposed. There were various developments over the years, so a number of clubs had associated party transactions approved by the league. We don't find out about these until they are approved, so we have no visibility from the outside as to whether they haven't been approved. But in February of 2024, the league decided, with the clubs obviously, to vote through some additional changes and some additional amendments to the APT rules. And we now know that City felt that that had gone too far, and that they objected on competition grounds to those new rules. And therefore they took action under what's known as a Rule X arbitration within the Premier League rules. And in June, there was a 2-week hearing, and we now know the outcome of that hearing.
Just before we move on to the outcome, Dale, what do you make of Man City putting forward this challenge in the first place?
Well, I think it's interesting. Firstly, I think it's interesting both sides claim to win in this, which is funny. I don't think it's fair of Man City to say the Premier League have been misleading in this, because I've just read about it this morning, and it's clear that City was successful in a couple of their claims and unsuccessful for many more. And the ruling itself seems about right. Man City complained that they weren't given access to the fair value calculations and stuff like that, the background data. That seems to be a fundamental point of fairness. They should have been, so they could have challenged them and stuff like that. So I think the rulings themselves seem to just straighten out APT rules, and the Premier League have pretty much vowed to tweak them and put them straight back into play. Did I miss your question?
No, not at all. But as Dale alludes to there, Stefan, both sides claiming victory. It is a bit of a strange situation. Obviously, you have your background in law as well. I'm going to get you to simplify it in a way that we'll all understand. If it was a football match, what would the score have been between Man City and the Premier League?
Yeah, I see it as a kind of 2-2, 2-1 type 2-1 to City. I think, ultimately City...
2-1 to the Premier League.
Well, look, it depends the lens that you look at the situation from. At the end of the day, City came out of the hearing with a better position than they went into the hearing.
And why is that? Why do you say they're in a better position?
Well, because they succeeded in effectively removing, ultimately, the amendments that have been made in 2024, which significantly expanded the scope of the APT rules. So we don't know exactly how this is all going to play out in terms of the redrafting of the rules. There is a dispute around that, and that's a central piece of City's letter to the Premier League clubs on Monday night, is that they disagree with the way that the Premier League has presented the next steps. City say that in correspondence, they have agreed with the Premier League that there will now be a process that will go back in front of the tribunal. Now, we don't know the Premier League's stance on that. Certainly from the Premier League statement, their position seems to be different. Their position is, we will all get round the table in the next 10 days, we'll cross out a few bits and pieces, we'll put in an extra clause around shareholder loans, and everything will be fine.
But Dale, you disagree. You think that actually this was, well, in your words, 2-1 to the Premier League. Why do you say that?
Well, because City lost most of their claims, and the Premier League have been clear they think they can simply change those elements of the APT rules that the tribunal found against, simply change them, and I think they probably can on my reading of it. So I think, you could say Premier League took 2 steps forward with the real change and 1 step back with the tribunal hearing, but whichever way I look at it, I think tighter rules are coming. City won't like it. But I think it's a step closer to tighter rules.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to challenge that particular piece. I mean, I think it is clear that the rules will be relaxed post the hearing, not tighter. I mean, we've had tighter rules. Tighter rules have come in. There's no question that the APT rules that came in on the back of the Newcastle takeover in 2021 significantly strengthened the Premier League's position in terms of assessing commercial deals. The rules that came in at the beginning of 2024 doubled down on that strengthening. But I do think that it's very hard to say that the decision of the tribunal is not that those rules went too far. And now what we're going to see, the materiality of these changes is up for debate, but we are certainly going to see a rowing back to probably something closer to the 2021 position, but with some additional things that City wanted around the disclosure of the information that the Premier League has in assessing commercial transactions, and more stringent rules in terms of the timetable. So I would say that, and really that's why I point to a score draw / a very narrow win for City, because I do think City have achieved some of their aims from the hearing, even despite the rejection, as Dale says, of a large number of their, I wouldn't call them claims, but they in any one of these sorts of cases, you will put forward a number of arguments, and you don't need to win them all. Winning some of them is still a good outcome.
It was 25, wasn't it? I think I read 25.
So the numbers that I've seen are 25, and City won 2 of the 25. Therefore, it's a big win for the Premier League. But it really doesn't work that way.
Are you saying those 2 are so significant that it ends up as a win for Man City?
The wins that City have got are clearly significant wins. I think it would be misleading.
Well, Dale's shaking his head there. You don't agree?
Yeah. I am, because I think they made a fair point, right? They should have had access to the data that the Premier League used. And
that's procedural.
Easy to change, right?
Correct.
Easy to change, and it's done. The other one was they complained it took too long. Easy to change.
Correct.
The Premier League said they were
you.
understaffed, and they'll sort that out. So I don't see a big deal.
Well, the big deal is the changes that were brought in 2024. The pricing is described within the decision as the pricing changes. They are quite extensive changes, and they do make quite a material difference to the approach of the Premier League. In particular, the burden of proof had been moved to the club presenting the fair market value transaction. That now has been crossed out, or will be crossed out. That is a significant change. Really, the key outcome, in my view, of the tribunal was that they rejected the extension of the rules that were put in place in 2021. It is true that they didn't rip them up. They didn't say, oh, you can't have any APT rules. In fact, if anything, they endorsed.
They did endorse,
a level of APT rules as being something that is good for the working of the Premier League. But those changes are significant that will be rejected in terms of 2024. And it's still not completely clear where we go next, because as we talked about right from the start, the 2 parties do not agree on the next steps.
Yeah, sounds a bit like the show here. In terms of how it does affect the rest of the league, though, because you said that where we go next. And I just want to talk about the other clubs, because it's interesting during the process that the witnesses called for Man City included clubs such as Chelsea and Newcastle and Everton. On the Premier League side, you saw the likes of Man United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham. It said to some people saying it's creating a bit of a civil war within the league. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I think to an extent. So there's legitimate commercial aspirations and positions of the various teams around the table, and you're never going to stop that, and that's a perfectly reasonable position for those clubs to take. That said, we are seeing a situation in respect of certain elements of the rules where there are two camps. And the big reason for why we had a situation with some teams supporting City from a witness perspective and some supporting the Premier League, on the City side, a lot of that was down to experience, because Chelsea, Everton, Newcastle were, it seems, although there's a lot of redactions in the decision, were those teams that have had the most experience putting forward associated party transactions to the Premier League for approval. And therefore, those are the teams that were able to talk about their experiences, talk about deals that maybe weren't accepted, talk about timing issues. So again, a lot of this is redacted, but so you have to sort of read between the lines. But that's why a lot of those teams were there. But of course, we do have a situation where there is an ideological difference of view between a number of the owners and City and a number of their allies, for want of a better word. So there is a civil war of sorts, yes.
You'd have to assume that the majority at the moment, though, is on the side of the Premier League, given even what I've read there in terms of, you know, which clubs seem to be on the side of City and which clubs seem to be on the side of the Premier League.
I think at the moment the majority sit with the Premier League in respect of associated party transactions and some of the ancillary matters around it. What you may well find is in respect of certain elements of the next few weeks in terms of the drafting that's going to be required, that bits of that majority break away. And remember, you need that 2/3 majority to get things through and to get these drafting changes approved, and abstentions sort of, you know, will alter that mix. It's important and talked about within the decision that the way in which those February 2024 amendments came in was really on a knife edge. You had two parties abstaining. Had those parties not abstained, it is unlikely that those amendments that came in 2024, that the decision has now effectively wiped out, they would not have passed. So it is quite finely balanced in the room. And I don't think there's certainty in terms of any particular proposal that's put now in that room. There's little certainty as to which way it's going to go, because it is quite finely balanced.
Dale, if your club, Forest Green, was in the top flight, we can dream, can't we? Hopefully one day it does end up happening. But if it was in the Premier League, which side do you feel that as a CEO, as a chairman, you would be on?
I think I'll be on the side of the Premier League on this issue. I think we've seen a lot of big oil money come into the Premier League. I think it's this arguably distorting the game, distorting the league. Newcastle were the most recent example, of course. There are other big commercial interests, of course, in the Premier League as well, as you can see from this chart in front of us both here, because the big win that I think that we haven't talked about yet is the shareholder loan exclusion from APT. Man City won their argument that shareholder loans should be included.
Well, if we have a quick look at that, actually, by the way, what you reference there, if you look at this table with the shareholder loan fees, Everton, right at the top, 451 million, then Brighton 373 million, Arsenal 259 million as well. I mean, Dale, was the point you're making there, does this give a reflection on how well run a club is?
I think it gives an indication of the distorting effect of massive amounts of money from the owners of some of these clubs on a competition, in a sport that we all love. I'm all for the Premier League being able to afford the best players in the world and that kind of stuff. But I think we need perhaps more balance between the top and the bottom of the Premier League, because some of them have incredibly rich owners and a lot of them don't.
Stefan, do you go along there with the majority of what Dale's saying?
Well, we don't share a world view that is necessarily consistent. But look, oil money, if we want to talk about oil money, has obviously come into many clubs in the same way that gambling has infected all of the Premier League. We only need to look at somebody close to the top of that table there in Arsenal in terms of their sponsors for the last 20 years, 25 years, has been a Middle Eastern airline. So oil money is prevalent across the entire sport. I think we have to be quite careful to understand what this table is in terms of the debt. There's nothing wrong with shareholder loans coming into clubs to support the development of those clubs. And one of the best run clubs, I think probably universally accepted one of the best run clubs, is Brighton, and they're near the top of the table. Really, all those shareholder loans signify is largely that the large shareholder who's put the money in over the years has not yet converted them to equity. So the reason that I didn't particularly focus on that element of it in terms of assessing the decision that's made is, first of all, City never, when it originally came up, City voted in favour of the exclusion of shareholder loans. So I don't think they are ideologically focused on that as an issue in the game. I think in terms of the other major parties that have significant shareholder loans, they will be very easily fixed by conversion to equity. Most of them are provided by near 100% shareholders and are effectively equity anyway. So I don't think it's going to be a big deal. I don't think having high levels of shareholder debt is a proxy for how well run you are or not. And I think in terms of Dale's overall point as to the future of the game, I think there has to be some concern that the Premier League is currently the preeminent football league in the world. And the league has to be very careful not to self-sabotage that position, in my view. And so there is a balance that's required, clearly. You cannot have a situation where there are no rules around spending. But likewise, we do have to encourage the investment by owners, by sponsors, and by the viewing public in the game, because it is good. It is good both for the Premier League and for this country, for the Premier League to be the preeminent football league in the world.
Dale, but where the Premier League is right now, do you feel at the moment they are at risk of self-sabotage already?
Yeah, in a different way, absolutely, with a few clubs spending vast sums of money, unimaginable sums of money, and it being harder for the rest of the league to compete. That creates an unbalanced league. Will Man City win it again? The title, is that a bit boring when it's always them, or the same four clubs, or maybe, fighting for top spot? As a football fan, I like watching the games, but the outcome at the end of the season isn't such a kind of close run thing. I just think that money's distorting the game, and not all of those clubs by far have big money backers or involving oil. Gambling is a problem in football. I agree there with Stefan. Not so much from a loans point of view, I would say, but from the fact that it dominates the airwaves around a football game. I mean, it absolutely normalizes what is a very damaging industry. It causes a lot of social harm, and I think we should ban gambling advertising from football on our screens.
There were some other stories involving Manchester City this week as well. Chicky Begiristain is set to leave the club. He's been the director of football, having joined in 2012. He's been very, very influential. He was he's a long time been a friend of Pep Guardiola, been a teammate as well, and was a big part of bringing him to the club as well. Dale, do you think that this news coming that he is going to leave in the summer, maybe the writing could be on the wall that this is also the time that Pep moves on as well?
That's an interesting thought, isn't it? I mean, I can't imagine. Well, here's the thing, right? He's either going to leave at his peak, right, which is surely now, or he'll wait until things aren't going so well. I mean, it's hard to say. I have no idea actually what Pep might be thinking. I was sad that Jurgen Klopp left Liverpool. But I understood his decision. And it happens, doesn't it? Fergie left Man United eventually, and I think they've really struggled actually to replace him. So if Pep leaves Man City, it could change everything.
Yeah, we'll be speaking about a certain Mr. Klopp a bit later as well. But just quickly as well, Stefan, how much praise do you think that Chicky Begiristain should get for the way that he has run that side of the operation for Manchester City?
Yeah, he's been an integral member of the the footballing success that the club has had since 2012. It's no coincidence that City were successful under his stewardship of that part of the business, even before Pep arrived. Clearly, he was central to Pep also joining, along with Ferran Soriano, the chief executive. So he will be a very, very big loss to City. I don't think there's any question. And dealing with, if it does come to pass that Pep leaves at the same time, that will be an enormous succession issue for City. To have, on the footballing side, your two key individuals leaving at the same time will be a huge issue.
A huge issue in the sense that it's just a huge change of regime.
Yeah, we know succession issues in football are incredibly difficult to deal with. I mean, we've seen it at United, we've seen it at Arsenal after Wenger. It took a long time for that situation to stabilise, and it is a very challenging situation to replace Pep Guardiola. I mean, that, it's obviously an attractive job, but to try and come in on the back of, to try and replicate what Pep's done is going to be extraordinarily difficult for somebody. So I think it's an enormous challenge, and that will also apply in respect of Txiki Begiristain, and especially also coming quite close after City lost Omar Barada to United. So we don't know yet if Ferran Soriano, the CEO, would also be part of a group that may decide to depart all at the same time. I mean, we don't have any visibility on this, but these succession issues in football are significant.
A more cynical fan might look at everything going on with Man City, everything going on in the background. That APT case wasn't even to do with the 115 charges that are against them as well. They might look at it and think, are these people moving on at a time when the club's in a bit of turmoil? Is that a fair way to look at it?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if anything, the strident manner in which City have portrayed their position post the APT decision would indicate that they are confident as to how the 115 hearing is going. But we don't know. We have very limited visibility. I mean, we have no visibility, to be honest, because everything is confidential. And we know that it's probably, 4 weeks in so far on that hearing. At the 4-week mark, a lot of the key evidence hasn't even been heard yet. So I don't think it can be a case where certain people are saying, well, I'd like to get out before some kind of very negative decision is heard. But who knows? I mean, we will see in the fullness of time.
What do you make of that, Dale? He had another shake of the head there.
Yeah, well, City have always been confident in their case, and as you say, the key evidence haven't even been heard. So, why would they be more confident now? How can that mean anything? I was kind of shaking my head because I'd read that Pep had said that actually he believed Man City completely, and if they'd lied to him, he would leave. That's an interesting thought.
Well, it is. I mean, the slight problem with that scenario is he's under his contract at the moment. He's leaving at the end of the summer anyway. So, the two things may or may not, come to pass at the same time.
They may not be linked.
No, well, that's very true.